The original Hopkins family, John and Mary, were early settlers to Trempealeau County. John, at 39 years of age in 1845, a brickmaker, immigrated to America from Leeds, England. He is listed in the 1850 census in Walworth County, Wisconsin, working as a laborer. Mary and the 4 youngest children followed on the 25th of August, 1851, on the ship Constantine, while a son stayed in England. The family moved to Preston Township, Trempealeau County, in 1855. There they established a homestead on 80 acres near the Trempealeau River in western Preston Township. The Hopkins family were members of the English community. Although John and Mary were unable to read or write, they prospered, with sons James and Alfred both owning acreages nearby. Daughter Sophia and her husband William Lennon were neighbors to the south. In July 1843, James, their eldest son to immigrate with the parents, married Angeline Alice Van Sickle, daughter of William Van Sickle and Carolyn Denny Van Sickle, a nearby neighbor. Together, the couple had 5 children. Angeline and James' farm was located on the banks of the Trempealeau River in northwestern Preston Township. It is there that they erected a sod house, later to be followed by a log cabin. Galesville, 18 miles to the south, was the closest trade center for the young family. As conditions for trade and supplies improved, the couple prospered. The Green Bay and Minnesota Rye Railroad purchased the right-of-way through the farm, opening trade in the village of Whitehall in the winter of 1874. James, a farmer and advocate of agricultural interests in the county, was active in the Preston Creamery Company and Farmers Trading Association. He was elected chairman of Preston Township and treasurer and clerk of the rural school district. He even served more than one term as deputy sheriff. After the death of Angeline's father, William Van Sickle, in October 1896, Angeline, known as Alice, purchased 7.5 acres from John O. Melby and his wife Jenny for the sum of $50 in the town of Lincoln, just outside the village of Whitehall's original plat. The undeveloped area was still rural agricultural land, with Frederickson's dairy cows across the road and no other dwellings to the north or east. The 1900 census shows James and Alice living in the village of Whitehall, between the dwellings of Joseph Beach and Nels Frederickson. The Beach home was located on the northeast corner of Main and Irvin, and the Frederickson farm was to the south of Irvin, across the road from the Hopkins. Fanny Hopkins Peterson, their daughter, wrote to her husband Henry Lee Peterson, telling him of the birth of their second son Harry, in her parents' new home in Whitehall in April 1897. In August 1885, Florison, eldest son of James and Angeline Van Sickle Hopkins, married Nellie DeMay Shepherd. Nellie's parents were also of the original English settlers in the area. Henry C. Shepherd, Nellie's father, was a farmer and breeder of Holstein cattle, believed to be the first of the breed in the area. Florison is found on 1901 land records for Township 21, Range 7, in the northwest corner of Section 6, owning an L-shaped 80 acres adjacent to his father's. James, since retiring from farming, had been suffering from illness and thought moving to another climate would be beneficial. So James and Alice moved to Washington to be near her sister in 1911. Florison and Nellie sold their acreage to neighbor and relative William Thompson for $6,000 in December 1912. James passed away from illness in April 1913. Florison purchased the home in January 1915 for $2,300 from his mother. Florison, now living on the outskirts of the village of Whitehall, purchased an interest in the auto sales company, later serving as president. The property was annexed to the city of Whitehall in September of 1916. The addition was called the Oak Park Addition. Florison engaged in state and county politics, and it is recorded that he was the delegate to the convention. In 1916, he ran for Trempealeau County treasurer and won by a comfortable margin. He served 2 terms in office. Florison and Nellie's only son, Harley, graduated from Whitehall Public Schools in May 1916. His father wished him to pursue a career in medicine, so he enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he remained for 1 year. He enlisted in the Marines in 1917 and was promoted to the rank of corporal, and served in Europe until May 1919. Newspaper clippings during World War II reveal he served in the American Red Cross Field Office stateside. After military service, he followed his passion and attended the Art Institute of Chicago, graduating with a degree in design in 1923. Later that decade, he took an extended trip to Europe, where he visited public gardens, museums, and great estates. Harley worked with design and architectural firms in Chicago for the next 2 decades. After World War II, he was under contract with the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis as a color consultant. Harley also took on private commissions for General Mills, the Dayton family, and large downtown retailers. With the unexpected death of his father in October 1931, Harley took over the day-to-day management of the property. From his home in Evanston, Illinois, Harley directed the completion of the interior renovations and the ongoing work of the gardens of the home for his mother. Country Life magazine, a national publication, featured the family home in the 1930s. From the article Victorianism at its Best, the photographs included in detail the historic Zuber hand-blocked wallpapers and the use of family heirlooms in Harley's design. The Country Life article lists the wallpaper in the library as Isola Bella, with a tropical theme. No further information can be found to this date. After the deaths of Nellie in July 1951 and Harley in September 1951, the home and contents were sold. The wallpaper in the parlor was removed during renovation in the late 1950s. The wall between the parlor and music room were removed to make for a large expanse across the entire front of the home by the new owners, Richard and Irene McGrath. In the 1930s, the Hopkins dining room boasted one of the most recognizable Zuber wall murals in North America. Views of America, or Scenic America, is barely visible behind the buffet. Scenes 2 through 13 are all that are known to be installed in the room. To the left of the buffet, the panels depict a view of New York Bay from New Jersey. Panels to the right represent West Point in New York. Originally created in 1834, the 49-foot mural was a French version of life in America, even though no French artist visited the young nation during the mural's design phase. In 1961, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, during her renovation of the White House, had this mural installed in the diplomatic reception room. It is unknown as to when the Hopkins wall covering was removed, but it was before 1994. Wainscoting panels and Zuber wood-blocked wall covering Passage Italien, or Italian scene, covered 4 walls of the music room. Originally hand-printed in 1812 in Alsace, France, the mural is comprised of 10 panels made by 240 individual wood blocks and 10 colors, primarily grays, white, and black. The gray tone palette was offset by tomato red draperies and red velvet chairs. These chairs were purchased by Harley's good friend and student John Torson, originally of Independence, Wisconsin. John became a private art dealer, and the chairs remained in his New York residence until his death in 2015. During a renovation in the 1960s, a wall was removed and one half of the mural as well. The chandelier was also moved to the dining room. During Harley's tenure with Holabird and Root architecture firm, Chicago, Illinois, in the late 1920s, his commissions included work for the U.S. government in Philadelphia, the state capitol in Bismarck, North Dakota, Wrigley Field in Chicago, and the Hotel Pennsylvania in New York. During the 1920s, he visited Mount Vernon, home of President George Washington. The exterior design of the Hopkins home, outbuildings, and gardens are replicated from that famous estate. The large columned portico or porch across the front, the pediment or triangular gable over the front door, the railings across the roof, and the Salem lookout are architectural details of a Greek Revival design. Harley believed that reconciliation between Victorian and modern architecture could be achieved using color. His favorite color palette was red, green, and yellow. He repeatedly used these 3 primary colors in projects at the University of Minnesota and in corporate applications throughout the Twin Cities. Additionally, he had the Whitehall House, garage, and gatehouses painted barn red and white trim. On the front portico, he placed what is termed funeral furniture. From the photos, it is white wrought iron outdoor furniture. In an interview in 1946, Harley is quoted in a Twin Cities interview, "Red is a masculine color. Show me a man who likes a good deep red, and I will show you a strong man." Harley provided the impressions for the garden and grounds, while Graham's, Nellie Hopkins, provided the execution. The property at one time covered over 7 acres, and historic photos capture the beauty of the grounds. Harley was heavily influenced by European landscape design and a nod to the naturalistic approach. Emphasis was placed on trees, shrubs, and native plants, in part due to product availability and cost. The provenance of the lawn statuary is unknown, and pieces were sold during the auction in 1953. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, the grounds were often open to the public on Sunday afternoons for a small fee. The year Richard McGrath built the 6-room motel is unknown, or when the elevation of the area was raised. Vicki McGrath Gifford stated, "The Garden Motel was popular until 1972, when Interstate 94 opened between Black River Falls and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The familiar story of Route 66 and small towns is repeated across America." Two of the more notable sculptures in the gardens in 1946 were Return of the Pioneer Mother, carved from a fallen oak tree by John Rood, and a sculpture of a woman's torso by Peter Lupori. Both men were friends of Harley, and all three were employed by the art department at the University of Minnesota. Rood and Lupori visited the Hopkins home in the summer of 1946 and carved the stoic woman from native wood in 2 days. Rood, a self-taught sculptor, specialized in folk objects. According to newspaper articles, this was his first outdoor carving. During that same visit in the summer of 1946, Lupori began a sculpture of a female torso. There is no further mention of the more valuable statue of the woman's torso. However, Lupori went on to use this form as a muse for future pieces. Per a verbal agreement between Rood and Hopkins, upon the death of either man, the wooden sculpture of the pioneer woman would become the possession of the other. John Rood and Peter John Lupori went on to become quite well-known and respected artists. They both have pieces on display at galleries, universities, and parks throughout the USA. In Whitehall, a rural farming community, post-World War I, Harley Hopkins was considered to be an authority on most things cultural. The folks in Whitehall seldom traveled more than 40 miles from their homes, unlike Harley, who had attended college, traveled abroad for leisure, and worked in a large urban city. He was a talented watercolorist and had a studio in the rear of the garage overlooking the formal gardens. He also wrote poetry, and occasionally a local craftsman was honored to accept one of his works of art in lieu of monetary compensation for services. Today, our local high school proudly displays one of Harley's alleged works. It was presented to the school in March of 1926. The piece is called After the Ramadan. This exceptionally large piece represents the feasting of the Turks after the Feast of Ramadan and is proudly displayed in the auditorium. Harley and his mother died within months of each other in 1951. They are buried in the Lincoln Cemetery, Whitehall, with earlier generations of the Hopkins family. The estate was given to Margaret Hopkins Dahl, Harley's younger sister, and Michael McPherson Hopkins, his stepson. In 1953, the estate was sold, ending over 70 years of Hopkins residence. This once wood farmhouse has been the site of family births, gatherings, weddings, and funerals for 3 generations of the well-known and respected family. Angeline Hopkins' white 2-story house has enjoyed a varied life, first as a pioneer home for a large family, a gilded house, a cultural center, a beauty salon, a lost and ignored landmark, and now a nationally known and historically recognized home, motor lodge, and guest house.